He wanted an open relationship, so I took it to his family tree. I sat across from Lurin on our 5-year anniversary when he pulled out a velvet box and slid it over the table. "Look, I'm open to marriage," he stated. "But I need the freedom to explore. There are so many beautiful women out there, and I need to experience them before I die." My gaze lingered on the Rolex on his wrist, then his Gucci belt. All purchases I'd made, covering his expenses while he supposedly got his act together. But Lurin didn't know my secret. I'd lied to him for our entire relationship. The reality was Lurin was at best moderately unattractive, and he had a notably small penis. Yes, you heard that right, practically non-existent. My love language, however, is words of affirmation. For 5 years I'd reassured him that size didn't matter, praising him, making him feel incredible when he genuinely wasn't. And now he actually believed it. "You know what?" I finally said. "You're absolutely right." His head snapped up. "See? This is why I adore you. You just get it." He reached across and squeezed my hand, already scanning a woman walking past our table. "This is going to be amazing for us." I returned his smile. He had no idea what was coming. Within a week, Lurin was a different man. He wore a new cologne, purchased in 5 installments through a payment plan. He'd sit beside me on the couch, swiping through dating apps, eagerly showing me photos of women. "This one wants to meet Thursday," he'd announce. "You should try it too." "Oh wait, you're probably too shy for this kind of lifestyle." I simply nodded, my own prize firmly in sight. After 2 weeks of Lurin's Instagram stories featuring other women, his mom finally texted me about the family barbecue. "You'll still come, won't you? Both his brother Jack and I really want you there." "I wouldn't miss it," I replied, and I meant it. At the barbecue, Jack was at the grill, wearing a shirt he'd undoubtedly bought himself. He smiled genuinely when he saw me, a warmth that made me feel truly seen. "Hey," he said. "I heard about the open relationship. Are you doing okay?" I stepped closer. "Actually, I'm doing great. Lurin wanted freedom. I'm just taking the same deal." His expression shifted. "Oh yeah." We talked for an hour, laughing, our hands brushing. Across the yard, Lurin watched us, his conversation sputtering mid-sentence. His mom approached, giving me a hug. "I always thought you were too good for Lurin anyway," she whispered. Here's the kicker. While Lurin was posting club photos and collecting numbers, his actual dates weren't going well. He'd return home early every time. Thursday night, back by 9 o'clock. Friday night, same story. He grew quieter, his bravado slowly eroding. 2 weeks later, as I prepared to go out, Lurin walked into our bedroom. "Where are you going?" His voice was hesitant, uncertain. "I have a date." "Oh," he said, sitting on the bed. "Anyone I know?" I met his gaze in the mirror. "Yeah, Jack." His face went ashen. "Jack? My brother Jack." "Yep. That's not funny." "I'm not joking." I grabbed my purse. "You said anyone. No restrictions, remember." "I didn't mean my brother. You said whoever I want." "I want Jack." I headed for the door. "You're being incredibly insecure right now. I thought we were exploring. This is different. You can't." "Can't what?" I turned. He opened his mouth, then closed it. He was trapped. "That's what I thought," I said. "Jack and I went to a lovely restaurant where he asked about my life and actually listened. I've wanted to ask you out for 5 years, he admitted. But you were with my brother." I posted a photo of us that night. Lurin viewed it from all 3 of his accounts. The text started at midnight. "We need to talk. You're doing this to hurt me." After that, I started spending nights at my best friend Chelsea's house, not seeing Lurin again until the next family dinner 3 weeks later. When Jack and I walked in holding hands, his mom practically rushed over. "Oh, I'm so glad you two finally got together." She hugged us. Jack has been talking about her for years, but he'd never do that to his brother. Lurin sat through dinner in silence while everyone gushed about Jack and me. His aunt kept saying things like, "Finally, someone with a real career." And Jack always treated his girlfriends well, not like before, trailing off and glancing at Lurin. After dinner, Lurin followed me to the kitchen. "Can we talk?" His voice was tiny. "Please. I'm kind of busy. Please." His eyes were red. "I made a mistake. The open relationship isn't working. That's rough, I said. But my brother, really? You said whoever I want. I'll close the relationship, he said, his tone chilling. We'll go back to normal. Just us. Like it was. That wasn't a request. It was a warning. I stared, unsure what he meant. The way he looked at me made my skin crawl. My phone buzzed. Chelsea's name lit up the screen, asking if I was okay, as I'd been in the kitchen so long. I typed back that I needed to come over right now and grabbed my jacket from the coat rack. Luren blocked the doorway, but I pushed past him, telling Jack I had an urgent matter to handle. His mom hugged me goodbye while Luren stood there, watching with crossed arms. The drive to Chelsea's apartment took 20 minutes, and she was waiting at the door with wine and her laptop open. I recounted everything about the kitchen encounter, and his strange threat about closing the relationship. She immediately started typing notes, insisting we document everything because it sounded like coercion. She opened a new document and had me repeat his exact words, adding timestamps. We saved screenshots of all our text conversations from the past 3 weeks, including his messages about wanting an open relationship. Chelsea emphasized this was crucial evidence if things escalated, and advised me to keep meticulous records moving forward. The next morning, I woke early and drove back to our apartment while Luren was at the gym. I systematically went through every drawer and folder, collecting receipts for everything I bought him over the years. The Rolex receipt was in my jewelry box, where I'd kept it after surprising him for his birthday. The Gucci belt receipt was in my email, along with dozens of clothing orders from high-end stores. I found rent payments spanning 3 years, showing I'd covered 70% every single month. Grocery receipts, documenting all our food purchases since he'd been between jobs for 2 years, filled an entire shoebox. My credit card statement showed restaurant bills, vacation expenses, and even his car insurance payments. I spread everything out on Chelsea's dining table and used her calculator. The total came to $32,400, a number that made me feel physically ill. I photographed every single receipt and uploaded them to a cloud folder Chelsea helped me create. Then I texted Jack, explaining we needed to discuss boundaries regarding his family situation. He replied immediately, suggesting coffee that afternoon near his office. When I arrived, he was already there with my usual order. He listened as I explained Luren's behavior, assuring me he understood if I needed space from his family drama. Jack promised to support whatever I needed and wouldn't pressure me about family events. He also mentioned Luren had been calling him nonstop, complaining about me, but he wasn't engaging. We agreed to keep our relationship separate from his brother's issues. Later that day, Luren posted a black and white photo of himself looking forlorn, with text about fake people showing their true colors. I screenshotted it immediately, adding it to my evidence folder without responding or even liking it. Chelsea came home from work and urged me to consult a lawyer about our shared lease and recouping my money. She had a friend at a legal aid clinic who assisted with domestic situations and could see me later that week. I called and made an appointment for Thursday morning. 2 days passed with my phone constantly buzzing with Luren's messages. First, he sent lengthy paragraphs about how much he loved me and had made mistakes. Then he shifted to angry texts, accusing Jack of being a terrible, disloyal brother. I only responded to practical matters, like the electric bill being due and needing him to transfer his half. Every message I sent was concise, and I screenshotted everything, including his responses. On Wednesday morning, Dean from HR called me into his office. An anonymous complaint had been made about my workplace behavior, claiming I was creating a hostile environment. I explained that my ex-partner was harassing me and attempting to sabotage my job. Dean took notes, stating they took retaliation seriously and would investigate thoroughly. He asked if I felt safe. I said yes, but requested it be documented that this harassment began after I ended things with Luren. Thursday's appointment at the legal clinic went better than expected. The advisor reviewed all my documentation and receipts, clearly outlining my options. She explained I could pursue repayment through small claims court for anything considered a loan, not a gift. She also detailed how to remove myself from the lease if Luren couldn't afford the apartment alone. We spent an hour drafting a formal separation agreement. Luren could keep the actual gifts like the watch and clothes, but needed to repay the money for rent, groceries, and bills, which were clearly loans to assist him. The agreement gave him 6 months to repay $20,000 in monthly installments. She noted this was generous as I could prove more, but it demonstrated my reasonableness. That afternoon, I emailed the separation agreement to Lurin with a read receipt. The email stated he had 1 week to respond before I would file in small claims court for the full amount. The read receipt showed he opened it within 3 minutes, but he didn't reply for hours. Around 7 p.m., I was watching TV with Chelsea when her apartment buzzer rang repeatedly. Someone was pressing every button in the building trying to get in. Chelsea checked the security camera on her phone. It was Lurin frantically pressing buttons. My stomach dropped. He must have gotten her address from my work directory or something. Chelsea told me to stay quiet while she went to the intercom. Someone from upstairs had already buzzed him in. We heard footsteps pounding up the stairs, then frantic knocking on Chelsea's door. "I know you're in there," Lurin yelled, hitting the door so hard the frame shook. I pulled out my phone and started recording while Chelsea grabbed hers to call building security. He continued pounding and shouting about needing to talk to me, about how I was ruining everything. The entire hallway could probably hear him screaming about his brother, his life, and how this wasn't fair. I kept recording everything while Chelsea spoke to security on the phone. Within perhaps 5 minutes, 2 security guards arrived. We heard them in the hallway telling Lurin he needed to leave. He started yelling at them too, claiming I'd stolen his brother, ruined his life, and turned everyone against him. The guards weren't tolerating it and practically dragged him toward the elevator as he continued screaming. Chelsea opened the door once they'd put him in the elevator, and we spoke to the guards. They took our statements, banning him from the property. One guard wrote up official documentation of the incident and gave us copies. They said if he returned, they'd call the police immediately. My phone was buzzing with texts from Jack, asking if I was okay. Lurin had called him right after being kicked out, screaming about betrayal and threatening to tell their parents the truth about me. I texted Jack back that I was fine and had nothing to hide, unlike his brother who'd been living off my money for years. Jack said Lurin sounded completely unhinged on the phone and worried about what he might do next. I told him about the security incident and sent him the video I'd taken. The next morning, I woke to an Instagram message from someone named Melanie Yates. She'd sent screenshots of her text conversation with Lurin from their date. In the messages, he told her he was basically single and in a dead relationship. She said when they met, he couldn't perform at all, and then spent 20 minutes blaming it on stress from his toxic relationship with me. I thanked her for reaching out and briefly explained we'd been in an open relationship that he had demanded. She was disgusted, stating he'd lied to her from the start. She offered to provide a statement if I needed it for any legal matters. I saved all her screenshots to my evidence folder. That afternoon, Lurin finally sent his response to the separation agreement. It was a lengthy, rambling email, accusing me of manipulating him for years and turning his entire family against him. He claimed I was emotionally abusive and controlling, and that I'd planned this whole thing to steal his brother. He refused to sign anything and demanded I move out of the apartment immediately, as he needed his space. I forwarded it directly to my legal advisor from the clinic. She helped me draft a response, pointing out that I was the primary leaseholder and had paid most of the rent for years. Records showed I covered 70% of rent monthly, plus all utilities. We gave him 30 days to either find another place to live or agree to the payment plan. She noted his email actually strengthened our case because it demonstrated his unreasonableness. That night his mom called me crying. Lurin had told her I'd been emotionally abusing him for years, and she didn't know what to believe. I stayed calm and told her I had documentation of our entire relationship, including all bank statements showing how much money I'd spent supporting him. She went quiet for a long time, then said she needed time to process everything. I could tell she was starting to see through his lies, but struggled to believe her son would fabricate such things. 2 days later, I had my counseling appointment, which I'd scheduled weeks ago. The therapist asked why I'd stayed so long with someone who didn't appreciate me or contribute anything. We discussed my childhood and how my parents had always made me feel like I had to earn love by taking care of people. She helped me identify this pattern of needing to be needed and how Lurin had exploited it. It was difficult to hear, but I knew she was right. The session helped me understand why I tolerated so much for so long. Later that week, I started receiving calls from creditors because Luren's payments were bouncing. They had me listed as an emergency contact from when he'd signed up for all those payment plans. Every company he owed money to was calling me because his bank account was empty. I provided them with his new phone number and went through the arduous process of removing myself from all his accounts. It took hours to untangle myself from his financial messes, but I needed to protect my credit. Each company confirmed they'd removed me and would only contact him going forward. That same night, Jack texted, asking if I wanted to grab dinner at a small Italian place downtown. I met him there after work, and we settled into a corner booth away from the windows. He ordered wine and we talked about normal things at first, like his job and my promotion prospects. Then he grew quiet, looking at me seriously. "We should probably talk about what this is," he said. I nodded and waited. He told me he'd watched Luren treat me poorly for years but never knew how to intervene without overstepping. He admitted seeing me pay for everything while Luren idled angered him, but it wasn't his place to interfere. We agreed to take things slow and not put labels on anything yet. The next morning, I woke to 3 Instagram messages from women I didn't know. They'd all matched with Luren on dating apps and wanted to share their experiences. The first said he showed up 40 minutes late to their coffee date and spent the entire time talking about his ex who was threatened by his success with women. The second said he tried to get her to pay for dinner because his card was declined. The third sent screenshots of him asking to borrow money after one date. All 3 noted he wouldn't stop talking about how his ex was crazy and controlling. I thanked them for reaching out and saved all their messages. That weekend, I decided to begin moving my valuable items out of the apartment while Luren was at his new weekend job, which his uncle had secured for him. Chelsea came over with boxes and we started packing everything I could prove I'd bought. My laptop, jewelry, the expensive coffee maker, all the kitchenware I'd purchased, even the good sheets and towels. Chelsea kept watch by the window in case Luren returned early. We loaded everything into her car and took it to a storage unit I'd rented. The entire process took 3 hours and 4 trips. Monday morning, I called Colin White, our landlord, to discuss the lease situation. He agreed to meet me at a coffee shop near his office. I brought copies of all the rent payments, showing I'd been covering most of it for years. Colin looked through everything and shook his head. He informed me Luren was already 2 months behind on his portion, which I'd been unknowingly covering. Colin agreed to remove Luren's name at the lease renewal in 3 months if the missed payments continued. He also mentioned he'd been receiving complaints about loud music and parties from Luren's unit since I'd been staying elsewhere. I thanked him and got everything in writing. 2 days later, my bank app sent an alert that someone tried to access our joint savings account. I'd already moved my portion to a separate account the week before, leaving only Luren's contributions, which totaled about $200. My phone started buzzing with angry texts from him, claiming I'd stolen his money. I reminded him the remaining balance was only what he'd put in over 5 years. He kept texting that I was a thief and he'd call the police. I screenshotted everything and didn't respond after that. The next morning, I saw his aunt had posted on Facebook about women who gold dig and then play victim when the relationship ends. It was clearly aimed at me, though she didn't use names. Within an hour, Jack had commented defending me. Some people work hard while others mooch off their partners. His mom chimed in supporting Jack. Soon, half the family was arguing in the comments. I stayed completely out of it, simply watching the drama unfold. My counseling appointment that afternoon focused on honesty. The therapist pointed out I'd been lying to myself as much as I'd lied to Luren. She helped me see that I'd convinced myself his laziness was temporary, and his lack of contribution would eventually change. We discussed how being honest with myself meant recognizing my own worth, and not settling for someone who didn't value me. It was hard to hear, but I knew she was right about everything. That night, I received a message from Alexa Figueroa with laughing emojis. She'd gone out with Luren the previous week, and it was a disaster. He showed up late without his wallet and asked her to cover drinks. Then he spent the entire date talking about his crazy ex, who was jealous of his success. He tried to invite himself back to her place and got mad when she said no. She said he mentioned me at least 15 times and kept showing her old photos of us to prove how happy he used to be. I thanked her for the warning and added her messages to my growing collection of evidence. By Thursday I was done playing nice. I drafted a final email to Luren with clear demands: move out within 45 days, pay back the $5,000 he owed in monthly installments, and stop contacting me directly or through others. I CC'd Colin, the landlord, and my legal advisor from the clinic. This time I included consequences. Eviction proceedings if he didn't leave, in small claims court for the money. I sent it Friday morning and waited. His response came Monday, but not by email. I was at my desk when Dean from HR called, saying someone was in the lobby demanding to see me. I knew immediately it was Luren. Dean went down to handle it while I stayed at my desk. 20 minutes later, Dean called to say security had removed Luren from the building after he started yelling. They filed a formal no-contact order and displayed his photo at all security desks. Dean said HR was treating this as a safety issue and asked if I needed any other support. I thanked him and went back to work, knowing I had another layer of protection. 2 days later, Jack's mom called me while I was making dinner. Her voice sounded different, softer somehow. She told me she'd been talking to other family members about everything that happened, and they all confirmed what she'd started to suspect about Luren's pattern of blaming everyone else for his problems. She admitted she'd always known he was irresponsible, but kept hoping he'd mature if she just gave him enough time and support. I stirred my pasta as she spoke about how she'd watched him go through job after job, always with some story about a bad boss or unfair treatment. She said she should have seen the signs when he moved back home 3 times before meeting me, each time with a different excuse about roommates or landlords being unreasonable. The conversation lasted 20 minutes, and by the end she was crying, saying she felt guilty for not protecting me from him sooner. That same week, I started receiving messages from mutual friends who'd heard Luren's version of events. 3 different people reached out, saying he'd been telling everyone I'd been cheating with Jack for months before we opened the relationship. They all noted the same inconsistency. His timeline didn't make sense because he'd been posting about our anniversary dinner just weeks before, yet claimed I'd been cheating for months. One friend sent me screenshots of Luren's messages where he contradicted himself about dates and details. Another friend who worked with Jack confirmed that Jack had been out of town for work during the time Luren claimed we'd started our affair. I saved all the screenshots in a folder labeled Evidence and continued documenting everything. The mediator, Jasper Conrad, called me Thursday morning to schedule our meeting at a coffee shop downtown for the following Monday. He explained the process would be neutral and focused on reaching a fair agreement about the apartment and finances. I agreed to the time and marked it in my calendar. Monday arrived and I got there 15 minutes early, ordering a coffee and reviewing my documentation one last time. Jasper showed up precisely on time, wearing a simple button-down shirt and carrying a leather folder. We shook hands and he explained we'd wait 10 more minutes for Luren before starting. 20 minutes passed before Luren finally walked in, wearing the Gucci belt I'd bought him for his birthday and a designer jacket I recognized from my credit card statement 2 months ago. He didn't apologize for being late, simply sat down, and immediately started complaining about having to meet at all. Jasper remained calm, pulled out paperwork, and explained we needed to discuss the apartment lease and any shared financial obligations. Luren slumped in his chair and admitted he couldn't afford the apartment alone, as the rent was $2,800 a month and his new job only paid him enough to cover maybe half that. He said he'd been trying to find a roommate, but nobody wanted to move in with the lease already in my name. Jasper took notes and suggested we work out a payment plan where Luren would have 60 days to either find a way to take over the lease or vacate the apartment. Luren's face reddened and he started arguing that 60 days wasn't enough time, but Jasper reminded him that was already generous, considering he hadn't paid rent in 2 months. I pulled out my folder and showed Jasper the documentation of Luren showing up at my workplace in Chelsea's apartment building. I explained how security had to remove him from my office, and how Chelsea's building had banned him from the property. Jasper meticulously wrote everything down in his notes, ensuring he had specific dates and times. Luren suddenly quieted, stopped arguing, his eyes darting between me and Jasper as if just realizing the extent of evidence I'd collected. Jasper suggested we add a no-contact provision to the agreement, and Luren didn't object this time. We spent another hour going through financial details, with me showing bank statements proving I'd paid for almost everything during our relationship. Jasper calculated that Luren owed me close to $12,000, but suggested we settle for $5,000 in monthly installments to make it more realistic. I agreed because honestly I just wanted this to be over, and to have my freedom back without dealing with court proceedings that could drag on for months. Luren signed the agreement with shaking hands, agreeing to move out within 45 days and pay me $500 a month for 10 months. Jasper made copies for everyone and explained the agreement was legally binding, and could be enforced through small claims court if necessary. After the meeting I called Jack to update him, and we discussed our situation. We both agreed it would be better to wait until after Luren moved out before going public about dating, as we wanted to minimize drama and let things settle down. Jack said he understood completely, and that he'd rather do things right than rush into anything that might cause more problems. He pointed out that we'd already waited 5 years, so a few more weeks wouldn't matter, demonstrating far more maturity than his brother ever had. Within days of signing the agreement, Luren started posting his designer items for sale online with sob stories about starting over after betrayal and rebuilding from nothing. I saw the posts because mutual friends kept sending me screenshots, but I didn't engage or respond to any of it. He listed the Rolex for half what I'd paid for it and the Gucci belt for a third of its value, clearly desperate for quick cash. I focused on my own life instead, going to work, spending time with Chelsea, and slowly rebuilding my sense of self without his dead weight dragging me down. Chelsea came over the next weekend with paint samples and furniture catalogs, determined to help me reclaim my space. We spent Saturday painting the bedroom walls a soft blue, a color Luren had always deemed too feminine. Sunday we rearranged all the furniture, getting rid of the ugly gaming chair he'd insisted on keeping in the living room, and replacing it with the reading nook I'd always wanted. We threw out his old posters and the ridiculous neon sign he'd bought for the kitchen that read, "Live, Laugh, Love." Ironically, by Sunday night, the apartment looked completely different, like a real adult lived there instead of a perpetual teenager. Chelsea helped me hang new curtains and arrange my books on the shelves I'd bought but never had room for before. The entire place finally felt like mine alone, not some compromise between what I wanted and what he'd tolerate. 2 weeks into the payment plan, my phone buzzed with a notification from my banking app showing a $500 deposit. I checked the transaction details and saw it was from Luren, right on schedule for the first payment. I forwarded the confirmation to my legal advisor at the clinic with a brief note acknowledging receipt, keeping everything professional and documented. There was no personal contact between us, just business through official channels, exactly how it should have been from the beginning if I'd been smarter about protecting myself. 3 days later, I came home from work to find Luren's key on the kitchen counter next to a folded piece of paper. The apartment felt different, emptier, with gaps on the shelves where his stuff used to be. I picked up the note and started reading something about how I destroyed his life and ruined his family relationships. I crumpled it up and tossed it in the trash without finishing it. The locksmith arrived within an hour and changed all the locks while I packed up the few things he'd forgotten into a box. I texted him that his stuff would be on the curb tomorrow morning and blocked his number again. That weekend his mom called, asking if I'd come to Sunday dinner because she still considered me family. I thanked her but said I needed some time to myself first. She understood and said the invitation would always be open whenever I felt ready. 3 weeks passed, and I heard through mutual friends that Luren had moved back in with his parents. Apparently, he was working at his uncle's construction company now and telling everyone he was taking time to find himself after our toxic relationship. People who knew the real story just rolled their eyes when they heard his version. Jack texted, asking if I wanted to try that Italian place downtown we talked about. We got a table by the window, and for the first time in weeks I didn't look over my shoulder. He made me laugh, telling stories about his coworkers, and actually asked about my promotion at work. When the check came, he paid without making it awkward or expecting anything in return. Walking back to my car, I realized this was what normal felt like. My counseling appointment that week focused on unpacking why I'd stayed so long with someone who didn't value me. We worked through my patterns of needing to be needed and how I'd confused being used with being loved. She helped me see that my worth wasn't tied to what I could provide for someone else. I left feeling lighter than I had in years. The next month, my banking app showed another $500 deposit from Luren. This time, there was a note in the memo field saying he was sorry for letting his ego ruin something good. I screenshotted it for my records but didn't respond. He didn't deserve my forgiveness or my acknowledgement. Chelsea surprised me the following weekend by inviting a bunch of our friends over for what she called my freedom party. Everyone brought wine and snacks, and we sat around my newly decorated living room, sharing stories. It turned out most of them had noticed the problems, but didn't know how to bring it up without seeming like they were attacking my relationship. My friend from work admitted she'd wanted to shake me when I'd mentioned buying him another expensive gift last Christmas. We laughed and cried, and I realized I had an amazing support system. Jack and I had been seeing each other regularly for a month when we decided to make things official. We didn't announce it on social media or make some grand declaration. We just quietly became a couple, free of drama or family meetings. He brought me coffee at work sometimes, and I'd cook dinner at his place. It was easy and comfortable in a way things with Luren never were. We talked about real things, and he remembered details about my life. When I mentioned my dad's birthday was coming up, he suggested we visit together. The payments from Luren kept coming on schedule, and I kept documenting them through my legal advisor. When the final payment arrived, an email came through my lawyer asking if we could meet for coffee to get closure. I had my advisor respond that I wasn't interested in meeting and considered the matter closed. My closure was my new life, free of him dragging me down. 6 months after he'd moved out, I was at the grocery store picking up ingredients for dinner with Jack. I turned into the cereal aisle, and there was Luren comparing generic brand prices with store brand. His designer clothes were gone, replaced with old jeans and a faded t-shirt. He looked up and saw me, his face flushing. He started to say something about how good I looked and asked how I'd been. I politely said I was fine and needed to finish shopping. He stood there holding his basket of cheap groceries, while I walked away feeling nothing but relief. Jack was waiting in the next aisle looking at pasta sauce and smiled when he saw me. We finished shopping together, him making jokes about my specific olive oil brands. At checkout, he insisted on paying even though it was my turn, saying he wanted to treat me. Driving home, I thought about how different everything was from a year ago. Back then I was buying groceries for two while Luren sat at home swiping through dating apps. Now I had someone who contributed equally and truly appreciated what we had together. The apartment finally felt like home now, with my pictures on the walls and my books on every shelf. Chelsea had helped me paint the kitchen a soft yellow that made the whole space feel warm. Even my plants were thriving now that I had the energy to take care of them. Work was going better too, since I wasn't stressed about money or dealing with Luren's constant drama. Dean had mentioned another promotion might be coming up, and I actually felt ready for it this time. The weekend Jack suggested we drive up to the mountains came 3 weeks later, and I packed my bag while looking at my organized closet that finally had space just for my things. We took his car up the winding roads and stopped at a little roadside stand where he bought us fresh apple cider without checking his bank balance first. At the cabin he'd rented, he carried both our bags inside and started a fire while I unpacked the groceries we'd bought together, splitting the cost without any awkward tension about money. That night, we sat on the deck looking at the stars, and he told me he'd watched Luren treat me badly for years, but didn't know how to say anything without seeming like he was just trying to break us up. He said he'd almost spoken up at Christmas 2 years ago when Luren made me pay for his parents' gifts and then took credit for them. The next morning we hiked to a waterfall, and he held my hand to help me over the rocks, even though I didn't really need help. Monday morning, Dean called me into his office and said the promotion paperwork was ready if I still wanted it. My new salary was almost double what I'd been making before, and Dean said I should have gotten this years ago, but I'd seemed too stressed and distracted to handle the extra responsibility. The first thing I did was update my direct deposit information to my new savings account that didn't have anyone else's name on it. 3 weeks into my new position, my team threw me a small celebration lunch, and everyone kept saying how much calmer and more focused I seemed lately. My birthday came 2 months later, and Jack's mom sent me a card with pressed flowers inside and a note about how she'd never seen Jack this happy in his whole life. She mentioned at the bottom that Luren had started therapy and was working on his issues, which made me feel a strangely satisfying sense of vindication, knowing he was finally dealing with his problems instead of making them mine. Apartment hunting began in spring when my lease renewal came up, and I realized I could actually afford something nice in a better neighborhood closer to work. Jack came with me to look at places, and we found an amazing one-bedroom with huge windows and actual closet space on the third viewing. The landlord ran my credit and approved me immediately, as my score had jumped without Luren's missed payments dragging it down. Moving day came on a Saturday, and Jack showed up with boxes and packing tape at 7 o'clock in the morning, ready to help. We loaded everything into the truck he'd rented, and by noon we were sitting on my new living room floor eating Chinese food straight from the containers. Chelsea came over that afternoon with a plant and a bottle of wine to celebrate my new place that was truly just mine. Setting up my home office in the spare corner felt amazing, knowing I could finally work from home sometimes without Luren interrupting to ask for money or attention. My bank app showed me something incredible 6 months after Luren moved out, when I checked my balance and saw actual savings accumulating for the first time in years. I opened an investment account that week and made my first deposit, feeling genuinely excited about planning for retirement and maybe buying my own place someday. The financial advisor at my bank said I was in great shape for someone my age, once I explained I'd recently gotten out of a financially draining relationship. Planning my first dinner party in the new apartment felt like such an adult thing to do, and Chelsea helped me pick out serving dishes at the thrift store. Jack and I cooked together the day of the party, him handling the main course while I made sides and dessert from scratch. Our friends started arriving around 7 o'clock, and everyone brought wine or flowers, constantly commenting on how happy and relaxed I looked. Chelsea pulled me aside in the kitchen and said she'd never seen me this light and free, like I'd finally become the person I was supposed to be all along. Someone took a group photo that night, and when I looked at it later, I barely recognized myself because I was actually genuinely smiling instead of forcing it. The 1-year mark from that anniversary dinner with Luren came faster than I expected, and Jack made reservations at a nice place downtown. He wore a suit he'd bought himself and picked me up with flowers he'd chosen because he knew I liked tulips better than roses. During dinner, he kept fidgeting with something in his pocket and finally stood up right there in the restaurant and got down on one knee. The ring he pulled out wasn't huge or flashy, but it was exactly my style, and he'd saved for it himself without putting it on credit or asking anyone for help. He spoke about building something real together based on respect and partnership, and truly being equals in everything. My hand shook as he slipped the ring on my finger, and everyone in the restaurant started clapping while I said yes over and over. We called his mom from the car, and she cried happy tears, saying she'd been hoping for this since the day she met me. Looking at Jack driving us home, I realized this was what real love felt like when it wasn't built on lies or financial dependence, but on genuine respect and honesty.